Part 1. The radio crackled with static. Then a voice broke through, raw, breathless, desperate. This is Razor 6 Actual. We are black on ammo. I repeat, black on ammo. 12 personnel, 4 wounded, surrounded on 3 sides. Request immediate air support or we're not making it out. In the operations center at Forward Operating Base, Kandahar, 5 officers shot to their feet simultaneously. Commander Ethan Harris lunged for the radio handset, his face taut under the fluorescent lights. Razor 6 hold position. F-16 package inbound ETA 40 minutes. Sir, we don't have 40 minutes. The voice cracked. An AK-47 burst rattled through the speaker. They're massing for final assault. We need CAS now. In the corner of the room, a woman in a faded gray flight suit name tag reading Whitaker Contractor stood from the logistics desk. Brown hair pulled into a tight bun, small frame, no makeup. Sir, I can be wheels up in 8 minutes. Commander Harris turned, his expression twisting. Whitaker, you fly cargo runs. I'm pilot qualified on A-10, sir. There's one bird on standby. Absolutely not. Captain Blake Mitchell, callsign Bronco, cut across her words arms, folding over his chest. Beside him, 2 other pilots smirked. That AO needs surgical strikes, not a mail-run specialist. Grace Whitaker didn't respond. Her eyes dropped to the tactical display screen hands, coming to rest lightly on the table edge. Anyone paying close attention would have noticed her fingers tapping in a subtle rhythm, the exact grip positions on a flight stick. Sir. Her voice stayed level, not rising. Those coordinates put them in a valley, 3-sided exposure. Time matters more than credentials right now. Commander Harris glanced at her, then at the wall clock. 16:47 hours, 40 minutes. Razor 6 didn't have 40 minutes. But in the next 20 minutes, everyone in this room would understand just how wrong they'd been about this woman. And on that radio, 12 Navy SEALs were about to be saved by someone whose real name they didn't even know until now. The map on the screen showed the SEAL position, in stark relief, a valley in Helmand province 47 kilometers north of the base. Red hostile markers clustered on 3 sides like a tightening noose. Commander Harris keyed the handset again, his knuckles white. Razor 6 air assets are en route. Can you hold? The response came after a pause long enough to spike everyone's heart rate. We'll do what we can, sir, but we're down to final magazines. If they push, static swallowed the rest. Major Charlotte Reed burst through the door, tablet in hand, scanning the room before her eyes landed on Grace. Harris, tell me you're not seriously considering sending a contractor into a hot zone. I wasn't, Harris said, but his tone had shifted, less certain now. Good, because contractors handle logistics, not combat. Reed's voice dripped with professional disdain. Whitaker, you're excused. The adults are working. Grace remained at the table, studying the thermal imagery cycling across the tactical display. Her head tilted slightly, the angle someone uses when calculating windage and distance. Major Reed stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. I said you're excused. With respect, ma'am, I'm reviewing the terrain. Grace's fingers traced the valley contours without looking down. Entry from the northeast minimizes exposure to those ridgeline positions. Western approach is suicide, or ADAA coverage overlaps there. Reed's jaw tightened. How would you know where the anti-aircraft coverage? Captain Blake Mitchell laughed a sharp bark that made 2 junior officers glance over. Sweetie, this isn't delivering spare parts to Bagram. Adults are talking tactics here. He turned his back, dismissing her entirely. Harris, I can be airborne in 20 if you pull me from the ready rotation. Bronco, you're slated for the Northern Patrol. Swap me out. Those SEALs need precision, not... He gestured vaguely toward Grace without looking. Whatever that is. The radio crackled again. Razor 6 to any station, we are taking incoming mortars. Repeat, mortars ranging in. We have casualties. A deafening explosion consumed the transmission. Lieutenant Connor Daniels strode through the door, flight helmet tucked under one arm, Apache pilot wings gleaming on his chest. He sized up the room in a single sweep, his gaze skimming over Grace and dismissing her in the same instant. Who authorized cargo personnel in operations? Daniels, not now. Harris snapped, but the lieutenant was already moving to the display. Let me take the Apache. I can be on station in... Your bird's down for maintenance, Major Reed interrupted. Hydraulic leak. Then what's the holdup? Daniels looked around, saw Grace standing quietly at the edge of the tactical table. Wait, was she volunteering for a combat sortie? His laugh was uglier than Mitchell's. Commander, please tell me we're not that desperate. Grace's hands remained flat on the table. She said nothing. But those who knew what to look for would have seen the way her fingers curved slightly, exactly the pressure you'd apply to a throttle under combat stress. Razor 6 sitrep, Harris demanded into the handset. Silence. Razor 6 respond. 10 seconds of static. 15. Then weakly, AM, taking heavy fire. Lost 2 more personnel. Request immediate. The voice dissolved into chaos. Grace spoke without raising her voice. Sir, I need those grid coordinates confirmed. November, Papa 7345, Echo Golf 8219. Harris blinked at her. How do you... Is that correct, sir? Yes, but... Then with respect, time is the asset we're bleeding right now. She straightened, meeting his eyes for the first time. That A-10 on the flight line is fueled and armed. I can provide close air support while we wait for the fast movers. Major Reed stepped between them. Absolutely not. You're a contractor. You fly supplies. You have 0 combat experience on your record. Ma'am, don't ma'am me. Stay in your lane, Whitaker. Before we see how this mission unfolds, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. This story gets intense, and you won't want to miss what happens when the truth comes out. The next 10 minutes will completely change how you see this woman and how everyone at that base sees her too. Stay with me. Grace moved to the weapon status board mounted on the wall, her eyes scanning the munitions loadout. The A-10 currently has 30mm rounds, 6 Mavericks, and rocket pods. If you swap 2 Mavericks for additional gun passes... Who asked for your input? Mitchell cut in. Harris, we're wasting time listening to her. But Grace continued as if he hadn't spoken, her voice calm and precise. Those mortar positions will be dug in. Mavericks are overkill. Gun runs with the GAU-8 will be more effective and preserve ordnance for secondary targets. The room went quiet. Lieutenant Caleb Stone, intel officer, looked up from his laptop. That's actually tactically sound. How did you... Lucky guess, Grace said flatly. Master Sergeant Logan Morrison entered from the rear corridor, a weathered SEAL instructor built like a fire hydrant. He'd been at FOP Kandahar for 3 months, training Afghan commandos, and he moved with the deliberate economy of someone who'd seen too much combat to waste energy on theatrics. His eyes swept the room, paused on Grace, lingered. The radio erupted. All stations, this is Razor 6. We are down to 2 magazines per man. I repeat, 2 magazines. They're bringing up RPGs for final assault. If no air support arrives in the next 10 minutes, we are executing E and E. Escape and evasion, the last resort before total collapse. Commander Harris slammed his palm on the table. Where the hell is that F-16 package? Sandstorm over Uruzgan province. Captain Amber Walsh said, entering with updated weather data. She was an Apache pilot, neutral expression, professional bearing. Flight ops just pushed their ETA to 55 minutes. 55! Harris's voice rose. Those men will be overrun in 10. The clock on the wall seemed louder than it should be. 16:58 hours. Tick, tick, tick. Grace spoke into the taut silence. Sir, permission to speak freely. Denied, Major Reed snapped. Harris, call ISAF headquarters. We need permission granted. Harris said, overriding her. Something in his expression had shifted the look of a man out of options. Grace's voice didn't change pitch or speed. Sir, that valley has limited ingress points. Northeast approach keeps the aircraft below radar coverage from those ridges. The A-10's titanium bathtub can absorb small arms fire. I can suppress those mortar positions and provide cover for a medevac extract. You can... Mitchell's laugh was vicious now. Based on what exactly? Your extensive experience flying? What's your logged combat time? Whitaker 50 hours 100. Sir, with respect, time is... Answer the question. Lieutenant Daniels joined in. What's your actual combat flight hour total? Grace's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sir, time is the asset we're losing. Sergeant Morrison took a step closer, his eyes on Grace's posture. She stood in a modified parade rest weight, balanced shoulders, squared feet, positioned exactly shoulder width apart. That wasn't contractor casual. That was someone with thousands of hours of military bearing burned into muscle memory. Colonel Carter Vance's voice crackled over the secure phone line. Harris, this is Vance. I understand you're considering an unauthorized asset deployment. Sir, our options are negative. We don't send unproven pilots into hot zones. Wait for the F-16 package. That's an order. Grace turned back to the thermal imagery display, her movements precise. She pointed to 3 heat signatures on the ridgeline. Those are mortar positions. 2-man crews. They'll displace fire again. You need to hit them on the first pass, or they'll relocate. Stone looked up from his intel screen. How can you tell crew size from thermal? The heat bloom pattern. 2 bodies, 1 tube. Grace's finger traced the screen. See, the temperature differential loader stays close to the base plate. Gunner offsets by 3 feet. Morrison moved to stand beside her, studying not the screen, but her hands. Calluses marked her palms, not the soft hands of someone who pushed papers, but the hardened skin from thousands of hours gripping flight controls. And there on the webbing between her thumb and forefinger, the distinctive wear pattern from a cyclic grip. The radio screamed. Contact, contact. There in the wire, Razor 6 is engaged, danger close. The transmission dissolved into the rapid percussion of M4 carbines on full automatic. Harris grabbed the handset with both hands. Razor 6 fall back to secondary position. Negative, wounded, can't move. We're making our stand here. The operations center erupted. Officers shouted over each other, calling for medevac, for artillery, for anything. In the chaos, Grace remained, still her eyes on that tactical display, showing 12 American operators about to die. Airman First Class Ivy Martinez, radio operator at her station in the corner, watched Grace with wide eyes. She'd been at Kandahar for 6 months, processed 1,000 routine communications, but something about this woman's complete calm in the middle of pandemonium made her skin prickle. Crew Chief Mason Torres appeared in the doorway, catching his breath. Sir, the A-10 is prepped, full combat load. I can have her engines hot in 4 minutes if you give the word. Mitchell whirled on him. Nobody gave authorization for... I did, Morrison said quietly. His voice carried the weight of someone whose opinion mattered in rooms like this. As ranking SEAL representative on base, I'm advising that we launch any available asset. Those are my brothers on that radio. Major Reed's face flushed. You can't just, ma'am, I can. And I'm telling Commander Harris that if we don't get air support over that valley in the next 8 minutes, 12 SEALs die. Morrison turned to Harris. Sir, I volunteer as backseat observer. If Whitaker's not qualified, I'll take the controls mid-flight. But we need to move now. Harris looked at the clock. 17:04 hours. He looked at the radio still broadcasting desperate gunfire. He looked at Grace, who stood with the stillness of someone who'd made peace with whatever came next. Whitaker, you get 1 chance. Morrison, you're her observer. If she can't handle it, you abort an RTB immediately. Clear. Crystal, sir. Then get to that bird. Your wheel's up in 5. Major Reed grabbed Harris's arm. This is insane. Her record says she's former Army Reserve basic helicopter pilot. Administrative flights. Nothing like, I don't care if her record says she learned to fly last week. Harris snapped. Those men are dying. Move Whitaker. Grace was already heading for the door, her movements efficient and unhurried. Morrison fell in beside her, and Torres led the way toward the flight line. Behind them, the operations center dissolved back into controlled chaos. Mitchell arguing Reed, protesting Walsh, pulling up weather data Stone, coordinating with ISAF. Colonel Vance's voice cut through on speakerphone. Harris, this is on your head if it fails. Do you understand your career? Yes, sir. I understand perfectly. The 3 of them, Grace, Morrison, Torres, stepped into the brutal Afghan afternoon heat. The A-10 Thunderbolt II sat on the tarmac, gray and ugly and beautiful, its massive GAU-8 cannon jutting from the nose like a threat. Torres had been prepping it, and when Grace approached his professional assessment, kicked in. He handed her the pre-flight checklist, but she didn't take it. Her hands moved over the aircraft with practiced efficiency, checking panel seams, testing control surfaces, examining weapons pylons. Torres glanced at his watch. Standard pre-flight took 12 minutes. She was doing it in 3. Crew Chief fuel status. 11,000 pounds, ma'am. Weapons load. 1,170 rounds 30mm, 6 AGM-65 Mavericks, 2 LAAU rocket pods, full countermeasure suite. Grace nodded, running her hand along the leading edge of the wing. Her fingers found a stress crack barely visible that the last inspection had missed. This needs to be logged, not critical, but watch it. Torres stared. How did you? She was already climbing the ladder, Morrison following her up. The back seat of an A-10 wasn't designed for passengers. It was a training configuration cramped and uncomfortable, but Morrison wedged himself in without complaint. He watched Grace settle into the front seat, watched her hands move over switches and controls with zero hesitation. "Whitaker," he said over the intercom, "what's your actual background?" Her hands kept moving. "Does it matter right now, Sergeant? Humor me. I'm a contractor. I fly cargo." She flipped switches in sequence, a pattern Morrison didn't recognize, but sensed was exactly right. "You'll want to secure that harness tighter. This might get rough." Morrison studied the back of her helmet, noticing for the first time a faded patch sewn onto her helmet bag in the cockpit pocket. Most of it was obscured, but he could make out partial letters 160th. The rest hidden by a fold. His blood went cold. 160th. Special Operations Aviation Regiment. Night Stalkers. "Whitaker. Tower, this is Warthog requesting taxi clearance." "Warthog Tower, you're cleared taxi runway 27, winds 260 at 12 knots. Grace's hand moved to the throttle, not the uncertain touch of someone relearning a skill, but the reflexive confidence of someone who'd done this so many times it had become cellular. The engines spooled up with their distinctive whine, and the A-10 began rolling. Morrison keyed his mic to the FOB frequency. "Operations Morrison. We're taxiing now." "Copy that," Harris responded. "Razor 6 just reported they're down to 1 magazine per man. Whatever you're going to do it fast." In the cockpit, Grace's hands moved across the controls with surgical precision. Morrison watched her scan instruments, not the slow, deliberate check of someone following a checklist, but the instantaneous pattern recognition of someone reading a language they'd spoken for years. "Tower Warthog ready for departure." "Warthog cleared takeoff runway 27. Godspeed." The throttle went forward. The A-10 accelerated that distinctive rumble building to a roar. Morrison felt the rotation exactly the calculated speed, no wasted runway, and then they were airborne, climbing into the crystalline Afghan sky. "Warthog, this is Hawk," Liam Anderson's voice from air traffic control. "Your vector is 035 for 47 clicks. Contact Razor 6 on Victor Hotel frequency." "Copy Hawk. Switching now." But before she changed frequencies, Morrison heard Hawk say to someone in the tower, "That's not how contractors fly." Grace banked the aircraft, leveling at 200 feet above ground level. The terrain below scrolled past brown hills, scattered compounds, dry riverbeds catching the late sun. She flew with the landscape, using valleys for cover, maintaining a profile that civilian pilots would consider insanely dangerous, and military pilots would recognize as advanced tactical flying. Modern military operations demand split-second precision, which is why advanced tactical communication systems have become non-negotiable. Secure satellite links, encrypted data transmission, and real-time GPS coordination can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. For professionals operating in high-stakes environments, whether military contractors, emergency responders, or corporate security teams, investing in military-grade communication technology isn't just smart, it's essential. These systems offer crystal-clear voice quality even in the harshest conditions, with redundancy features that ensure you're never out of contact when it matters most. Morrison couldn't stay quiet any longer. "Whitaker, what's your actual background? And don't give me the contractor line." "I told you, Army Reserve. And I'm telling you, Army Reserve helicopter pilots don't fly like this." He gestured at the terrain rushing past at 200 feet. "That's NOE flying, nap of Earth, special operations technique." Grace adjusted trim, her touch feather light. "Sergeant, we have 6 minutes to AO. I need you to pull up thermal imagery on that tablet in your left storage pocket. I want real-time updates on enemy positions." Morrison found the tablet, but his eyes kept returning to that helmet bag, to those partial letters. 160th SOAR, the most elite helicopter unit in the U.S. military. The ones who flew Delta and SEALs into the most dangerous places on Earth. The ones who, Sergeant imagery. He activated the tablet linked to the satellite feed. Enemy positions bloomed on the screen, heat signatures clustered around the valley. 3 mortar positions confirmed. 2 technical vehicles looks like DSHK heavy machine guns mounted. Multiple small arms signatures. I count approximately 40 hostiles. Copy. What's Razor 6's position? Center of the valley, northern end. They're in a compound, partially collapsed structure. Grace's hands moved on the controls, adjusting their approach angle. Those mortars will be the primary threat. DSHKs are secondary. Small arms will absorb. Absorb! Morrison's voice rose. Whitaker, those DSHKs fire 12.7mm rounds. They'll punch through, not through the tub. Her voice remained calm. The titanium bathtub around the cockpit can absorb heavy machine gun fire. The aircraft's designed for it. Have you reviewed the A-10's survivability specs? I've seen A-10s shot to pieces. And they flew home. That's the point. She glanced at a display. 4 minutes to AO. Morrison keyed the radio. Razor 6, this is Warthog, inbound your position ETA 4 mics. What's your situation? The response came through ragged breathing and gunfire. Warthog, whoever you are, we are combat ineffective. 8 effectives, 4 wounded critical. Enemy massing for final assault. We need danger close fire support, or we're done. Razor 6, understand danger close. Stand by. Grace's voice came over the intercom, and for the first time Morrison heard something beneath the calm, not fear, but a kind of crystalline focus that he'd only heard before in the most experienced combat operators. Sergeant, when we arrive on station, I need you to spot targets and confirm my runs. Can you do that? I can. Good, because this is going to get close. The valley appeared ahead, a scar in the landscape. Morrison could see the collapsed compound, the heat signatures of the SEALs clustered inside. Surrounding them, concentric rings of hostile forces moving closer. Razor 6 Warthog has visual on your position. We're starting our run. Grace banked hard, lining up on the first mortar position. Morrison felt the G-forces push him into the seat, 6-7 Gs, the kind of maneuvering that took both skill and physical conditioning to maintain. His vision tunneled slightly at the edges. Grace's breathing stayed even. Target locked, she said, her voice mechanical now. Guns hot. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon roared to life, and Morrison felt the entire aircraft shudder as 70 rounds per second tore downrange. The 30mm depleted uranium shells impacted the ridgeline, and the first mortar position simply ceased to exist in a fountain of dirt and fire. Splash 1, Morrison called. Grace pulled up, rolled inverted, pulled through a maneuver Morrison had seen performed exactly twice in his career, both times by pilots with thousands of combat hours. She lined up on the second mortar position, squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 spoke again, its voice like tearing metal, and the second position disappeared. Splash 2. Then the world exploded. The DSHK heavy machine gun opened up from one of the technical vehicle's tracers, arcing through the air in streams of green fire. Morrison heard impacts, metal on metal, as rounds punched through non-critical sections of the aircraft. Taking fire, Grace said, her voice unchanged. She rolled right dove, pulled into a climbing turn that defied physics. The tracers followed, but fell behind the gunner, unable to track her maneuvers. Sergeant, paint that technical for Maverick. Morrison's hands moved on the tablet designating the target. Target painted. Fox 3. The AGM-65 Maverick missile dropped from the wing motor, igniting tracking toward the technical. The explosion was enormous. The truck flipped end over end, bodies scattered like thrown dolls. The DSHK gun tumbled through the air, still firing tracers spiraling wildly into the sky. Good hit, Morrison shouted. Grace was already lining up the next pass. Razor 6, we're suppressing Mortar 3. Get ready to move your wounded. Copy, Warthog. Standing by. The third mortar position was dug in behind a berm partially protected. Grace came in low, 50 feet above the ground, flying straight at it in what Morrison recognized as a gun pass from hell maneuver that required nerves of absolute steel. The GAU-8 roared again, shells walking across the berm, chewing through earth and flesh and metal. The mortar tube flew into the air, spinning a man's body still clinging to it before gravity took over. If you're as hooked as I am right now, smash that like button. Something about this pilot isn't adding up, and we're about to find out what she's really capable of. The pieces are coming together, but the biggest reveal is still ahead. Don't go anywhere. Morrison's heart hammered. He'd seen close air support before hundreds of missions. But this was different. This was art. This was someone who didn't just fly the aircraft, but inhabited it. thought through it, made it an extension of their will. "Whitaker," he said quietly, "who are you?" She didn't answer. The second technical was moving, trying to reposition. She rolled, pulled, hard, lined up. "Guns!" The GAU-8 stitched a line of destruction across the vehicle, and it erupted in flames. Razor 6 all mortar positions neutralized. Both technical vehicles destroyed. You're clear for extract. Warthog, I don't know who you are, but thank you. Mark our LZ with green smoke. Copy smoke. Morrison watched Grace circle overhead, providing cover as a green smoke canister popped in the compound, and the SEALs began moving their wounded toward an open area. Then he noticed something: anti-aircraft artillery positions on the western ridge, previously silent, now tracking them. Warthog, AAA tracking you. Break left. Grace was already moving, rolling the aircraft inverted, pulling into a split S that brought them hurtling toward the ground in a screaming dive. The AAA opened up tracers, filling the sky where they'd been a second earlier. Morrison felt his stomach try to climb out through his throat. The G-forces were brutal now, 8, maybe 9 Gs, the world graying at the edges, pressure building behind his eyes. He heard Grace's breathing still controlled, still even as she pulled out of the dive at what couldn't have been more than 100 feet, leveling into a terrain-following flight path that kept them below the gun's traverse. "Flares!" she barked, and Morrison slapped the countermeasure release. Brilliant heat signatures scattered behind them, decoys against any heat-seeking missiles. The 8OA fire shifted confused, tracking the wrong targets. Grace climbed again, rolled, and Morrison saw it happen, in brutal clarity. The emergency brake turned the 7G, pulled the way the shoulder strap on her flight suit strained, and then tore fabric, ripping under the stress of the maneuver. The suit pulled open, exposing her left shoulder, and there it was. Black ink on pale skin, wings. Not standard military wings, Night Stalker wings. And above them, arched in perfect letters, 160th SOAR. Below, 2006, 2014. Morrison's entire world stopped. He'd heard stories, every SEAL had, about the Night Stalker pilots who flew blacked-out helicopters into the worst combat zones on Earth. The ones who'd insert teams into Pakistan, Yemen, Syria, places where officially U.S. forces didn't exist. The ones who'd take fire from every direction and still complete the mission. And among those legends, there were bigger legends. Call signs whispered with reverence. The operators who'd done things that would never make it into official reports. His voice came out strangled. "Night Stalkers? Oh my God. Whitaker, what was your call sign?" 3 seconds of silence. She completed another gun run, destroying scattered enemy fighters, fleeing the valley. Then quietly, "Valkyrie." The tablet fell from Morrison's hands, clattering against his harness. "No, no way. You're the Valkyrie?" She said nothing, lining up for another pass. Morrison keyed the faux B frequency with shaking fingers. "Harris. Commander Harris, you need to know she's 160th SOAR. Call sign Valkyrie. The Valkyrie." In the operations center, Commander Ethan Harris dropped his coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, splashing hot liquid across his boots. He didn't notice. Major Charlotte Reed's face drained of all color, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Captain Blake Mitchell grabbed the edge of the tactical table to steady himself, his earlier arrogance evaporating like smoke. "Say again!" Harris's voice cracked. "Did you say 160, SOAR, sir, Night Stalkers?" "She's got the tattoo. Dates 2006 through 2014. Call sign Valkyrie." Lieutenant Daniels sat down hard in a chair, face pale. That's not possible. Valkyrie's a myth, a story they tell in flight school about." The radio from Razor 6 cut him off. "Wait, did he say Valkyrie? As in the pilot from Objective Rhino, August 2011? Is that... Holy cow, is that her?" Captain Amber Walsh, standing near the door, felt her knees go weak. She'd been at flight school when the stories came through. Objective Rhino, the operation that wasn't supposed to exist. 3 SEAL teams trapped in a valley, not unlike this one, completely surrounded, taking fire from every direction. A Night Stalker, Black Hawk pilot female, which was rare enough in special operations aviation, who'd flown into a kill zone that every other pilot said was unsurvivable. She'd made 3 runs, extracted 72 operators under fire, so heavy the aircraft looked like a sieve when it landed. She'd taken rounds through the cockpit, through the rotors, through systems that should have brought her down. She'd flown with instruments shot out hydraulics failing fuel, streaming from punctured tanks. And she'd gotten every single operator out alive. Walsh had joined the military because of that story, because someone proved it was possible, and they'd just been mocking her, calling her a mail-run specialist, telling her to stay in her lane. "Oh my God," Walsh whispered. "What have we done?" Lieutenant Stone's fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up classified databases. "I'm accessing her service record now. Need authorization." "Do it," Harris snapped. "Override everything." The file loaded slowly redacted sections marked in black. But what wasn't redacted painted a picture that made the room go silent. Chief Warrant Officer 3, Grace Whitaker, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, 8 years active service, 217 combat missions, Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with Valor Device, Air Medal with 10 oak leaf clusters. Stone's voice trailed off. "There's more. Classified operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. She was part of Neptune Spear's support package." Neptune Spear? Ivy Martinez spoke up from her console. "That's the Bin Laden raid." Harris finished his voice hollow. "She was one of the pilots." Mitchell had gone from pale to green. "I called her. I said she was—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Major Reed stood frozen tablet forgotten in her hands. She'd spent years fighting her way up through a military that questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. She'd internalized that fight, turned it outward, become the harshest critic of other women to prove she wasn't soft. And she'd just tried to block the most decorated female combat pilot in recent military history from saving American lives. The radio crackled. "Razor 6 to Warthog, we're loaded. Medevac inbound. Request you maintain overwatch. Copy Razor 6, we're not going anywhere." In the A-10, Morrison finally found his voice again. "Ma'am, I have to ask. Why hide this? Why fly cargo runs when you could?" Grace's hand stayed on the controls circling the valley, watching for any remaining threats. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that had nothing to do with radio distortion. "After Objective Rhino, I did another 3 years. Good years, hard years." She paused, adjusting trim. "Then, in 2014, we took a mission. Classified. It went bad. I lost my entire crew. Every single one. Hilo went down. I was the only one who walked out." Morrison said nothing. "After that, I tried to keep flying. But every time I strapped in, all I could see were their faces, hear them on the intercom. So I resigned my commission, took contractor work, quiet work, anything that didn't remind me of what I'd lost." She banked the aircraft. "Came to Kandahar because it was supposed to be quiet, rear echelon stuff, away from the fighting. But you volunteered today. Those were SEALs, your brothers, my brothers. Didn't matter what I wanted, mattered what they needed." The medevac Black Hawk appeared on the horizon, flanked by 2 Apache gunships. Captain Walsh's voice came over the radio. "Warthog, this is Guardian 1-6. We have visual on the LZ. Request you maintain high cover while we extract." "Copy, Guardian. Warthog is high and dry." Morrison watched Grace orbit overhead as the medevac landed, watched the SEALs load their wounded, watched the Black Hawk lift off and turn for home. The Apache gunships spread out in escort formation, professional, efficient, the system working as designed. "All aircraft, this is Hawk. Nice work out there. RTB, when ready." Grace turned the A-10 toward home. Below the valley was silent, now smoke rising from destroyed vehicles. Morrison could see bodies scattered across the ridgelines, the price of aggression paid in full. "Warthog, this is Razor 6. The SEAL's voice was thick with emotion. "We're clear. All personnel accounted for. I don't know how to thank you." Grace keyed her mic. "No, thanks needed. Just doing the job." "Valkyrie?" The call sign came through with reverence. "They told us you'd retired, left the service." "I did." "Well, thank you for coming back. Even if, just for today, you saved 12 lives. Our families thank you. Our kids thank you." He paused. "I was at Rhino, ma'am. I was one of the 72 you pulled out that night. You saved me once before. Today makes twice. I owe you everything." Grace's hand tightened on the stick. "You owe me nothing, Razor. Get your men home safe. Roger that. Razor 6 out. The flight back took 15 minutes. Morrison spent it in silence processing, watching the woman in front of him fly with the casual competence of someone who'd forgotten more about aviation than most people would ever learn. Watching her hands make tiny corrections, maintaining perfect altitude, and heading conserving fuel, setting up for landing, while simultaneously monitoring 6 different systems. This wasn't just a skilled pilot. This was someone for whom flying had become as natural as breathing. Tower Warthog inbound for landing. Warthog Tower, you're cleared straight in runway 27, wind calm. And Warthog, the whole base is waiting for you. Grace said nothing to that. They broke through the pattern lined up on final approach. Morrison could see the flight line below, and his stomach tightened. It wasn't just a few people. It was everyone. Hundreds of personnel lined up along the taxiway, standing at attention. The A-10 touched down that characteristic firm landing rollout, smooth and controlled. Grace taxied toward the parking spot, and as they got closer, Morrison could see faces. Commander Harris at the front, standing rigid at attention. Major Reed beside him, face-stricken. Captain Mitchell, Lieutenant Daniels, Captain Walsh, Lieutenant Stone, all of them at attention. The entire operations staff, the intel section, maintenance crews, admin personnel, security forces, medical staff. Everyone who could walk had turned out. Grace shut down the engines, and in the sudden silence, Morrison popped the canopy. Hot air rushed in, carrying the smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid and the indefinable scent of an aircraft that had just been in combat, burnt propellant, heated metal adrenaline. She climbed down the ladder, slowly, her movements careful. Morrison followed. When her boots hit the tarmac, Commander Harris stepped forward and saluted, not the casual salute of routine military courtesy. The full, formal salute of respect rendered to a superior, held until returned. His hand was rock steady, his eyes locked forward. Grace hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then her hand came up, returning the salute with the same precision. Harris dropped his hand and extended it for a handshake. Chief Whitaker, I apologize. I didn't know. I should have trusted your assessment. I was wrong. Grace shook his hand. Sir, you made the right call with the information you had. No apology necessary. But Harris wasn't done. I was dismissive, condescending. I let assumptions override judgment. That's on me, and I own it. Captain Mitchell stepped forward next, removing his sunglasses. Up close, Morrison could see his hands shaking. Ma'am, Chief, I was completely out of line. What I said was inexcusable. I'm sorry. Grace looked at him, really looked, and Mitchell felt like he was being measured and found wanting. Captain in combat ego kills, remember that. Yes, ma'am. Major Reed approached, and Morrison saw actual tears in her eyes. Chief Whitaker, I've submitted a formal rescission of my earlier report. I was wrong about everything. I let my own issues cloud my judgment. I'm sorry. Grace's expression softened slightly. Major, we all carry things. Just remember, there are women coming up behind you who need you to hold the door open, not close it. Reed nodded, unable to speak. Lieutenant Daniels came next, looking young and uncertain. Ma'am, I'm embarrassed, ashamed. You're everything I want to be as a pilot, and I treated you like someone unproven, Grace finished. I was unproven, to you. I hadn't demonstrated capability. Learn from this credentials matter less than performance. But also, remember to look for capability in unexpected places. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Captain Walsh stepped forward, and Grace recognized her patch Apache pilot. Walsh's voice shook. Chief Whitaker, you're the reason I joined aviation. I was in flight school when the stories about Objective Rhino came through. My instructors said it was the most incredible piece of flying they'd ever heard of. They never mentioned Valkyrie was a woman. I didn't find that out until years later. She straightened. Thank you for proving it was possible, for existing. Grace's professional mask cracked just slightly. Captain, you're doing the same thing now for the next generation. Keep flying, keep proving. Crew Chief Torres approached with a tablet. Ma'am, post-flight inspection. We took 14 hits. Hydraulic line nicked 2 holes in the horizontal stabilizer, 5 rounds through the vertical stab fuel cell penetration that self-sealed. Aircraft's amber status needs maintenance, but fully mission-capable with repairs. He looked up. Ma'am, how did you know about that stress crack on the wing? Felt it through the controls during my gun passes. The wing loaded asymmetrically under G. She paused. That crack's been growing for about 60 flight hours. Should have been caught on the 100-hour inspection. Torres checked his maintenance logs, his face paling. You're right, it wasn't logged. I'll write it up immediately. Do that. A-10s are tough, but they still need care. The crowd began to disperse slowly, personnel returning to duties but casting glances back at the woman who'd just become a legend in their midst. Morrison stayed close, protective instinct kicking in, despite knowing she needed no protection. Colonel Vance's helicopter landed 30 minutes later. The rotors hadn't even stopped spinning before he was striding across the tarmac toward where Grace sat on a equipment crate drinking water Torres had brought her. She started to stand, but Vance waved her down. Chief Whitaker, I owe you an apology as well. I overruled Harris based on procedure, not assessment. That could have cost 12 lives. Sir, you followed protocol. That's your job. Protocol isn't worth American lives. He sat down on another crate, informal peer-to-peer, despite the rank difference. I've been reviewing your file, the unclassified parts anyway. I have a question: why contractor work? Why not instruct at Rucker or transition to test pilot school? With your record, you could write your own ticket. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Sir, after I lost my crew, I needed distance from special operations, from combat, from... She gestured vaguely. All of it. I understand, but I want you to know we have open positions, instructor billets, standardization pilots. If you ever want to come back, name your terms. Sir, I appreciate that, but I think I'm done with active duty. Then stay on as contractor, but not cargo runs. I'm authorizing direct tasking for time-critical missions. You'd bypass normal approval chains. When something urgent comes up, you get the call. He stood, extending his hand. Think about it. Grace shook his hand. I'll think about it, sir. For veterans transitioning to civilian contractor work, understanding specialized insurance coverage is critical. High-risk deployment insurance, comprehensive life insurance policies, and disability coverage designed for former military personnel offer protection that standard civilian policies simply can't match. Financial advisors specializing in military contractor portfolios can help structure tax-advantaged investment strategies, particularly for those earning combat zone income. With proper planning, contractors can build substantial retirement portfolios while still actively deployed, taking advantage of unique tax benefits and investment opportunities unavailable to traditional employees. Okay, we're at the point where everything is about to explode. Hit that like button if you can feel the tension building. What happens in the next few minutes will shock everyone watching and everyone on that base. The truth is, seconds away. The sun was setting over Kandahar, painting the mountains in shades of amber and purple. Grace sat alone in her quarters, a small containerized housing unit with a bunk desk and locker, staring at a photograph. 8 people in flight suits standing in front of a Black Hawk helicopter, Night Stalker wings on their chests. The photo was dated August 17, 2014. 10 years ago. Almost exactly. A knock on the door. Ma'am, it's Morrison. Come in, Sergeant. Morrison entered, closing the door behind him. He held 2 bottles of water, offered her one. She took it. He sat on the desk chair, giving her space. Can I ask what happened in 2014? Grace looked at the photo for another long moment. Classified mission, Yemen. We were supposed to extract a high-value target from a compound. Intelligence was wrong. Place was 3 times more heavily defended than reported. We took fire on ingress, lost our tail rotor, had to put down hard. Morrison waited. Crew got out, we set up a perimeter, called for QRF, quick reaction force. But we were deep in hostile territory. Closest friendlies were 90 minutes out. Her voice stayed level, but Morrison could hear the effort it took. They came at us in waves, small arms, RPGs, mortars. My co-pilot, my crew chiefs, my door gunners, they held them off. Gave me time to rig demolition charges on the bird, destroy the classified equipment. Held them off while I called in airstrikes, talked the fast movers onto target. How long? 73 minutes. QRF arrived, extracted me. I was the only one still... She stopped. The only one. I'm sorry. I got commendations, medals. They called it heroic. But it wasn't, it was survival. And 7 people died so I could survive. She set down the water bottle. After that, I couldn't fly combat anymore, couldn't lead crews, couldn't ask anyone to follow me into danger when I knew what it cost. Ma'am, with respect, that's not... I know what you're going to say, Sergeant, that it wasn't my fault, that they were doing their jobs, that it was the enemy who killed them, not me. Her eyes met his. I've heard it all, from counselors, chaplains, commanders. And intellectually, I know it's true, but knowing something and feeling it are different things. Morrison nodded slowly. So you came to Kandahar to fly cargo, quiet, safe. Until today. Are you okay? After today? Grace considered the question seriously. I don't know yet. Ask me tomorrow. She stood moving to the window, looking out at the flight line, where the damaged A-10 sat under floodlights maintenance crews swarming over it. But those SEALs are alive. That matters more than my feelings. For what it's worth, ma'am, I think you're the bravest person I've ever met. And I've met a lot of operators. She turned surprised. Why? Because you came back. You could have said no, could have stayed safe, but when it mattered, you didn't hesitate, even knowing what it might cost you emotionally. Morrison stood. That's not just bravery, ma'am. That's something more. Grace didn't respond to that. After a moment, Morrison moved toward the door. Get some rest, Chief. You've earned it. Sergeant, he paused. Thank you for spotting targets, for being professional in the back seat, for... She gestured vaguely. Everything. Anytime, ma'am, literally. If you ever need a backseater again, I'm your guy. After he left, Grace sat back on her bunk, still holding the photograph. The faces looked back at her young, confident immortal in the way that only people who don't yet know they're mortal can be. I'm sorry I couldn't save you, she whispered, but I saved 12 others today. Hope that counts for something. The photograph didn't answer. It never did. But for the first time in 10 years, Grace felt like maybe it was enough. She set the photo on her desk, turned off the light, and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, new chances to fly or not to fly. But tonight, 12 Navy SEALs were alive to see their families again. 8 of them would heal from their wounds. 4 of them would need longer recovery, but they would recover. And somewhere in California or Virginia or wherever SEAL Team 6 operators went between missions, a man named Ryan Fletcher was holding his kids, telling his wife he'd made it home again, knowing that without a woman he'd never met, he wouldn't be having that conversation. It had to be enough. Grace closed her eyes and for the first time in a very long time, slept without nightmares. The sun rose over Kandahar at 0543, painting the mountains in shades of copper and amber. Grace woke before her alarm, 20 years of military discipline etched into her nervous system, impossible to erase. She dressed in her contractor flight suit, laced her boots with practiced efficiency, and stepped into the cool morning air where the desert hadn't yet begun its daily transformation into an oven. The base was already stirring with the mechanical rhythm of military routine. Personnel moved between buildings like blood cells through arteries, vehicles rumbled past trailing dust, and the distant whine of turbine engines signaled aircraft preparing for morning sorties. But something had shifted in the 24 hours since her mission. As Grace walked toward the chow hall, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned, eyes followed. A young airman couldn't have been more than 19. Face still carrying the softness of recent civilian life, stopped dead in his tracks, came to rigid attention and rendered a crisp salute. Grace returned it automatically, confusion flickering across her face. Contractors didn't rate salutes. The protocols were clear. She kept walking, but the strangeness followed her like a shadow. At the chow hall entrance, a staff sergeant with a combat patch from the 82nd Airborne held the door open, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile. Morning, Chief. Coffee's fresh. Made it strong the way operators like it. Thank you, Sergeant. The title still felt wrong on her ears. She hadn't been chief in a decade. Inside the usual morning chaos, unfolded metal trays clattering against rails, dozens of conversations mixing into white noise, the smell of powdered eggs and bacon and burnt toast, creating that distinctive military breakfast atmosphere. Grace grabbed a tray and moved through the serving line, trying to be invisible. The private manning the egg station looked up, recognition flooding his young face, and without asking gave her a portion easily twice the standard size. Then another scoop of hash browns. Then extra bacon. Ma'am, he he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "I just want to say thank you. My brother's with SEAL Team 6. He was in that valley yesterday. You brought him home. You brought my brother home." Grace felt her throat constrict. She managed a nod, couldn't trust her voice, and moved down the line. Behind her, she heard the private tell his co-worker, "That's her. That's Valkyrie." She chose her usual corner table, the one partially hidden by a structural column, the one where she could sit with her back to the wall and observe without being observed. But before she could even set down her tray, Captain Amber Walsh appeared with her own breakfast. "Mind if I join you, Chief?" Grace gestured to the empty seats. "It's your Air Force. Free country." Walsh sat, and within 3 minutes, Lieutenant Caleb Stone joined them, then Sergeant Dylan Porter from maintenance, then Airman Ivy Martinez from communications. Grace found herself at the center of a table full of personnel who'd been strangers 48 hours ago, and now treated her like some combination of celebrity and living legend. She didn't feel like either. She felt like someone who'd done her job under circumstances that required it. Chief Stone said between bites of toast, his intel officer's curiosity clearly burning, "I pulled the rest of your file last night. The parts that aren't redacted, I mean. Objective Rhino wasn't your only legend. There are mentions of operations in 12 different countries. Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, obviously Pakistan, Somalia. One report said you flew into a firefight near Damascus, extracted a Delta team that was compromised, and did it with one engine out and your co-pilot unconscious from a head wound. Intelligence reports get things wrong sometimes." The report was written by the Delta team leader. He recommended you for the Medal of Honor, called it the most incredible piece of flying he'd witnessed in 23 years of special operations. Grace took a sip of coffee, using the moment to compose her response. Recommendation was downgraded due to classification requirements. Got a Distinguished Flying Cross instead. Happens a lot in special operations. The missions that deserve the most recognition are the ones that can't be publicly recognized. "Ma'am," Martinez spoke up, her voice, tentative fingers, nervous on her coffee cup. "Can I ask you something personal? You don't have to answer if you don't want to." "Go ahead, Airman." "Why women? Why were you one of the first female Night Stalker pilots? What made you want to push into special operations aviation when it would have been so much easier to just not?" Grace considered the question, recognizing it as genuine curiosity rather than challenge. "I didn't set out to be first at anything. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to be a trailblazer or make history. I just wanted to fly, wanted to serve. The Army said I could do both, so I did." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Being female was incidental to who I was. Being a pilot was everything I was. Still is." Walsh nodded slowly, something complicated passing across her face. "But it must have been extraordinarily hard. The discrimination, the doubt, the constant pressure to prove yourself. Having to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. It was hard, every single day, every single flight, every single mission." Grace met her eyes directly. "Still is, apparently. Yesterday proved that nothing's really changed. I've been flying for 20 years, have more combat experience than 99% of the pilots on this base, and I still had to fight for the right to do my job." An uncomfortable silence settled over the table like fog. Porter cleared his throat, his mechanic's hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Chief, for what it's worth, everyone who doubted you yesterday, they're not doubting you today. Word spread through the base like wildfire. By 1900 hours last night, everyone knew the story. This morning, you're literally all anyone's talking about. You're famous." "Fantastic," Grace said dryly. "Just what I always wanted, attention and scrutiny." Stone grinned despite the tension. "Too late, ma'am. You're legendary now, at least on this fob, probably on every fob in theater by the end of the week." After breakfast, Grace made her way to the flight line to check on her A-10. The morning heat was building that peculiar Afghan heat that seemed to press down from above, while simultaneously radiating up from below. Torres and his maintenance crew were deep into repairs, access panels open like surgical incisions, tools scattered in organized chaos across mobile workbenches. Torres saw her approach and climbed down from the wing, wiping hydraulic fluid from his hands with a red shop rag. "Morning, Chief. We're about 6 hours from having her green status again. That fuel cell self-seal held perfectly brilliant engineering on these birds, but we're replacing it anyway." New hydraulic line complete patchwork on both stabilizers. Full systems diagnostic replacing 14 rivets that showed stress from the combat maneuvers. He handed her a detailed damage assessment report. Could have been so much worse. Grace scanned the report with the eye of someone who could read aircraft damage the way doctors read x-rays, noting bullet entry and exit points, measuring angles, reconstructing the entire engagement in her mind like watching a film in reverse. The DSHK gunner on that second technical was tracking well, better than average. He compensated for our maneuvers faster than most enemy gunners I've encountered. Professional training, not militia. He still missed you. Barely. If I'd pulled 2 degrees less on that emergency brake turn, he'd have put half a dozen rounds through the cockpit. We'd be having a very different conversation right now. Or no conversation at all. She looked up from the report. Train your crews, Chief. Emphasize the difference between confident and complacent. Even the A-10's legendary armor has limits. Yes, ma'am, I'll add it to our next safety briefing. Commander Harris appeared across the tarmac, walking with the purposeful stride of someone who'd made a decision and intended to follow through. Chief Whitaker, you have a moment. They moved into the shade of a hangar where the temperature dropped from unbearable to merely oppressive. Harris looked like he'd spent most of the night awake, probably replaying yesterday's events, probably imagining the alternative timeline where he'd stuck to his guns and refused to let her fly. That timeline ended with 12 dead SEALs and a commander's career destroyed by stubbornness. Sir, if this is another apology you already... It's not. Well, it is, but it's more. He pulled out a tablet, fingers swiping through a lengthy document. I've been working on this since 0300. New protocols for FAB operations. Any contractor with combat aviation credentials gets full verification and validation before mission assignments. No more assumptions based on current job descriptions. No more gender bias, conscious or unconscious, clouding tactical decisions. He scrolled down, showing her section headers and subsections. I'm also implementing mandatory unconscious bias training for all officers. Not the check-the-box garbage, but real training, quarterly reviews, accountability measures. This doesn't happen again on my watch, not ever. Grace read through the document carefully, her eyes catching on SIGA-specific phrases, noting both strengths and potential gaps. Sir, this is thorough, genuinely comprehensive. But can I make a suggestion? Absolutely, please. Add a section on credential verification for all personnel, not just contractors. Make it universal policy. That way it's not about one incident or one person. It becomes about systemic improvement across the board. Makes it harder to dismiss as a knee-jerk reaction. Harris stopped scrolling, looking at her with new appreciation. That's strategically smart. Reframe it from personal to procedural. Make it about the process, not the personalities involved. Exactly, and it has the added benefit of being the right thing to do regardless of circumstances. I'll implement that change immediately. Thank you, Chief. He hesitated clearly, working up to something else. Also, Colonel Vance asked me to relay an offer. He wants you on direct tasking status for time-critical missions. No bureaucratic approval chains, no committees, no delays. When something urgent develops, you get the call first. You'd have authority to launch without standard clearance procedures. Are you interested? Grace looked past him at the A-10 behind her crew, at the bullet holes being methodically patched, at the physical evidence of violence absorbed and survived. 24 hours ago, she'd been a cargo pilot hiding from her past. Now she was being offered a position that would put her right back in the center of special operations. The irony wasn't lost on her. Can I think about it? Of course. Take whatever time you need. The offer stands indefinitely. After Harris departed, Morrison appeared from the direction of the SEAL training compound, walking with that distinctive operator, bearing superficially relaxed, but fundamentally alert, casually lethal in the way that comes from years of combat experience. Morning, ma'am. Sleep okay? Better than I expected. The nightmares stayed away for once. You, like a dead man, turns out flying with a living legend is emotionally exhausting. He grinned, but his eyes were serious. Got a message for you. Razor 6 and his team are flying in tomorrow afternoon. 1,400 hours. They want to meet you face to face. Properly. Grace felt her stomach tighten involuntarily. Sergeant, that's really not necessary. They already thanked me over the radio. I don't need, ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't about what you need, it's about what they need. Morrison's voice gentled but remained firm. Those men owe you their lives. They have families waiting at home who owe you their husbands, their fathers, their sons. Let them say thank you in person. Let them have closure on what happened out there. She wanted to argue, wanted to retreat into the comfortable anonymity she'd cultivated for a decade. But Morrison's eyes held something that stopped her understanding, born from his own experience with gratitude and debt, and the complex emotions that survive combat. Okay, tomorrow at 1400. Good, and Chief. They're bringing something for you. Fletcher wouldn't tell me what, but he said it was important. Said it was something they don't give lightly. After Morrison left, Grace spent the morning in meetings she hadn't anticipated and didn't particularly want. Major Bradford summoned her to the pilot briefing room, where he spent 90 minutes debriefing her mission with the intensity of someone studying a master class. He pulled up gun camera footage, freeze-framed critical moments, asked technical questions that demonstrated his own deep expertise. This pass here, he said, pointing to a frame showing her A-10 at what couldn't have been more than 50 feet above ground. That's either brilliance or insanity, maybe both. I've seen pilots with 3,000 combat hours who wouldn't attempt that approach. The target geometry required it. Higher altitude would have reduced accuracy. Lower was impossible due to terrain. 50 feet was the mathematical solution. Most pilots would have found a different solution. Called for artillery support. Waited for better positioning, requested backup. He paused, his gray eyes studying her carefully. You didn't hesitate. Why? Because SEALs were dying. Every second I spent finding a safer solution was a second they didn't have. The math was simple: risk to 1 aircraft and 2 crew versus certain death for 12 operators. No contest. Bradford nodded slowly, something like reverence in his expression. That's the difference between competent pilots and legendary ones. Competent pilots follow procedures and make it home. Legendary pilots understand when procedures become irrelevant, when the mission requires something procedures can't teach. He stood, extended his weathered hand. It was an honor watching you work, Chief, even if it was just through gun camera footage and after-action reports. Grace shook his hand, feeling the calloused grip of another pilot who'd seen real combat. Thank you, Major. That means something coming from you. One more thing. I'm recommending you for the Air Force Cross for yesterday's action. What you accomplished deserves formal recognition. Sir, I'm not Air Force. I'm not even active duty anymore. Doesn't matter. The mission matters. The lives saved matter. The extraordinary skill under fire matters. Let me handle the bureaucratic obstacles. Over the next 48 hours, the consequences of Grace's mission continued rippling outward in ways she hadn't anticipated, creating waves that reached far beyond one forward operating base in southern Afghanistan. Lieutenant Daniels sought her out during evening briefings, approaching with the humble uncertainty of someone recognizing their own inadequacy. He asked if she'd review his flight techniques, provide tactical guidance, help him become better. She agreed, spending 4 hours going over his approach, patterns, his weapons employment decisions, his communication protocols. She offered corrections that he absorbed with the desperate intensity of someone who'd glimpsed excellence and wanted to close the gap. Captain Mitchell Bronco found her in the operations briefing room 3 days after the mission, his usual swagger completely absent. Chief, I need to apologize again, and I know you'll say you already accepted my apology, but I need to say this anyway. He sat down heavily in a chair across from her. What I said wasn't just inappropriate or unprofessional. It was toxic. It was emblematic of everything wrong with military culture around gender. I've been thinking about it constantly. About how I treat people, especially women, especially contractors, especially anyone I perceive as beneath me in some imaginary hierarchy. His voice dropped. I've been talking to the chaplain, trying to understand why I default to belittling others, trying to be better. Grace studied him for a long moment, noting the genuine distress in his face, the signs of someone actually engaging in the difficult self-reflection. Captain, the best apology isn't words. It's change behavior sustained over time. Show me you learned something. Don't tell me. Yes, ma'am, I will. I promise I will. Major Charlotte Reed found her in the chow hall 4 days later, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of determined humility. She sat down without asking permission, which Grace respected. At least Reed wasn't treating her like fragile glass. Chief, I've been drafting new policies for gender integration in combat roles. Practical implementation strategies, accountability measures, promotion, pathway protections. I want your input, if you're willing to provide it. Grace accepted the tablet and read through the draft policy document. It was genuinely good, thoughtful, comprehensive, addressing real systemic issues without descending into empty rhetoric or virtue signaling. Major, this is solid work, substantive. If implemented correctly, this could actually change outcomes for women in combat specialties. Thank you. I realized something after watching you save those SEALs. Reed's voice carried the weight of genuine revelation. I've been part of the problem for years, tearing down other women to prove I was tough enough to hang with the men, making it harder for women coming behind me because I had to fight so hard to get where I am. That's not leadership. That's cowardice dressed up as strength. Recognition is genuinely the first step toward change. What's the second step? Action sustained over time. Mentor someone. Lift up the women coming behind you instead of creating obstacles. Use your position and authority to open doors rather than guard them. Reed nodded slowly, something like hope flickering in her eyes. I can do that. I will do that, starting immediately. Aviation professionals seeking advanced certifications face complex regulatory requirements, especially when transitioning between military and civilian credentials. Specialized legal services for former military pilots navigate FAA credential transfers, security clearance, maintenance, and contractor licensing requirements. Educational programs offering accelerated commercial pilot training, specifically designed for veterans, can fast-track transitions to high-paying civilian aviation careers. Understanding how to leverage military flight hours, maintain professional certifications, and negotiate contractor agreements requires expert guidance, the difference between a smooth transition and years of bureaucratic delays. If this story gave you chills, drop a like and check out the next video on screen. There are more incredible stories like this one, where the person everyone underestimated turned out to be the most dangerous one in the room. You won't believe what happens next. On the afternoon of the third day, Ryan Fletcher arrived at FOB Kandahar with 11 other members of SEAL Team 6. Grace was in her quarters reviewing maintenance reports when Morrison knocked with the distinctive 3-rap pattern they'd established. "Ma'am, they're here. Conference room in 10 minutes. She took a breath that felt insufficient for what was coming, straightened her flight suit with hands that wanted to tremble, and followed Morrison through the maze of containerized housing units and administrative buildings. The conference room was larger than she'd expected, with a long table and enough chairs for 20 people. Inside, 12 men in desert camouflage utilities stood at rigid attention in a perfect formation that would have made any drill instructor weep with pride. They looked hard in a way that went beyond physical conditioning, scarred, weathered, carrying the indefinable quality that comes from surviving things designed to kill you. 4 of them displayed visible injuries, bandaged arms, stitched facial lacerations, the careful movements of cracked ribs in the painful process of healing. But despite their injuries, they stood with absolute military bearing, shoulders back, eyes forward, waiting. Fletcher stood at the front, a man in his late 30s with premature gray threading through his close-cropped hair and eyes that had witnessed more darkness than anyone should have to see. When Grace entered, he called out with a voice that could have carried across a battlefield. "Attention!" 12 operators snapped to perfect attention with synchronized precision. "At ease," Grace said quickly, uncomfortable with the formality. "Please everyone sit down." They sat, but their posture remained formal, backs straight, hands resting on thighs, every movement controlled and purposeful. Fletcher remained standing at the head of the table, his weathered hands gripping the back of a chair. "Chief Warrant Officer Whitaker, I'm Lieutenant Ryan Fletcher, SEAL Team 6. These are my men, the men you saved when we had no right to expect salvation." "Lieutenant, I was just doing—" "Please, ma'am." Fletcher's voice was rough with barely controlled emotion. "Let me finish. I need to say this." Grace nodded, falling silent. 3 days ago, we were surrounded in that valley, completely encircled. We'd burned through our ammunition, defending the compound, protecting our wounded, holding out for support that kept getting delayed. We knew every single one of us knew we weren't making it home. His voice thickened. We'd accepted it, made our peace with it, recorded final messages for our families, said our goodbyes to each other. We were preparing to make our last stand when your call sign came over the radio. The room was absolutely silent except for the air conditioning's mechanical hum and the distant sound of aircraft engines. Warthog inbound. Those 2 words changed everything. We didn't know who you were. Didn't care. Any help was better than dying alone in that godforsaken valley. Fletcher pulled a folded, sweat-stained piece of paper from his cargo pocket, unfolded it with careful reverence. But then Sergeant Morrison identified you, called you Valkyrie, and everything changed again because I knew that name. Every SEAL who's been in the teams for more than 5 years knows that name. He paused, and Grace could see him fighting for control. August 19th, 2011. Objective Rhino. I was a petty officer 2nd class then, on my 2nd deployment, young and stupid and thinking I was invincible. When that valley turned into hell, and 3 SEAL teams got pinned down by overwhelming force when the quick reaction force couldn't reach us through the enemy positions, when we accepted we were done, you flew in. His voice broke slightly. You made 3 runs into that kill zone, 3 times into fire so heavy it sounded like hail on a tin roof. You pulled out 72 operators that night while taking fire from every direction, flying a helicopter that should have fallen out of the sky from the damage it sustained. I was number 47. You saved my life 13 years ago. Grace felt her eyes burning. She blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall. So, 3 days ago, when I heard that call sign again, I knew absolutely we were going to survive, because Valkyrie doesn't leave people behind. Never has. Never will. Fletcher reached into another pocket and pulled out something that caught the fluorescent light, a coin gold and heavy embossed with intricate detail. Chief Whitaker, this is our team coin. We don't give these to civilians. We don't give them to other military personnel as favors or souvenirs. You have to earn it. You have to bleed with us, suffer with us. Prove beyond any doubt that you're one of us. He stepped forward, pressed the coin into her palm, with both hands his grip firm and warm. Ma'am, you've earned this twice over. Your honorary SEAL Team 6, family. If you ever need anything at all, you call. We'll move heaven and earth to be there, guaranteed. Grace looked down at the coin, feeling its substantial weight, reading the inscription, understanding what it represented. When she looked up, every man in the room was watching her with expressions of absolute respect and gratitude so profound, it felt crushing. I don't know what to say, she managed her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to say anything, ma'am. Just know your family now. That's not a metaphor. That's literal truth. One of the SEALs in the back, younger than the others, maybe mid-20s, with a bandaged shoulder and a wedding ring, catching the light raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, can I ask a question? Of course. Why did you come back? Sergeant Morrison told us you'd retired from special operations, left active duty, built a whole new life as a contractor doing quiet work. But when we needed help, you didn't hesitate. You volunteered immediately. Why? Grace was quiet for a long moment, feeling the weight of 12 sets of eyes, knowing her answer mattered in ways beyond simple curiosity. Because you needed help. Because I had the skills and training to provide that help. Because... She paused, choosing words carefully. Because I lost my entire crew 10 years ago in Yemen. Lost them to an ambush we couldn't escape. I was the only one who made it out, and I've carried that survivor's guilt every single day since. I couldn't save them, but I could save you. Had to try. Had to prove to myself that my training, my experience, my survival had meaning and purpose beyond just staying alive. Fletcher's expression softened with understanding. Ma'am, I read the classified after-action report from Yemen. What happened to your crew wasn't your fault. You held off enemy forces for over an hour, called in airstrikes, coordinated the rescue operation while wounded. You did everything humanly possible. I know that intellectually, Lieutenant, but knowing something and feeling it are fundamentally different things. Yeah, Fletcher's voice carried the weight of someone who understood that distinction intimately. They are. He glanced at his men, then back to Grace. Ma'am, if it helps at all, you've saved 84 American operators over your career. 72 at Objective Rhino in 2011, 12 of us 3 days ago. 84 lives that continued because of your skill and courage. 84 families that stayed whole. That's not redemption. You don't need redemption. But maybe it's peace. Maybe it's enough. Grace closed her hand around the coin, feeling the embossed details press into her palm. Maybe it is enough. Maybe it finally is. The SEALs stood and formed an orderly line, each one stepping forward to shake her hand, with the firm grip of warriors acknowledging a fellow warrior. Some said thank you in voices thick with emotion. Some just gripped her hand hard and nodded, conveying more through silence than words could express. Some had tears openly running down their weathered faces, making no attempt to hide them or wipe them away. The young SEAL with the wedding ring, Grace learned his name was Petty Officer James Mackenzie, gripped both her hands in his. "Ma'am, my wife just had our first baby, a girl, Emma Rose. She was born 6 days before this mission. Because of you, I gotta meet my daughter, hold her, hear her first cry. Because of you, Emma will know her father." His voice broke. "Thank you doesn't begin to cover what I owe you, but thank you." After they filed out, Grace sat alone in the conference room for 20 minutes, staring at the coin, processing emotions she'd kept carefully controlled for a decade. Morrison found her there, entered quietly, sat across from her without speaking. His presence was comfortable, undemanding. "You okay, ma'am?" "I honestly don't know. That was more intense than the actual combat mission. They meant every single word. That coin seals don't give those out as participation trophies. You're literally part of their family now, for life." Grace turned the coin over in her hands, watching light play across its surface. "Sergeant, can I tell you something? I've been running for 10 years. Running from my past, from my trauma, from the memories of my crew dying while I survived. I thought if I could just hide, just stay small and quiet and invisible, eventually it would stop hurting. Did it work? No. The pain never diminished. I just got better at ignoring it, pushing it down, pretending I'd moved on." She looked up, meeting Morrison's steady gaze. "But yesterday, flying that mission, saving those SEALs for the first time in 10 years, I felt like myself again, like the person I was before Yemen. And today, meeting Fletcher and his team, seeing what my actions meant to them, I think maybe running was the wrong strategy all along." Morrison nodded slowly. "Ma'am, I've been a SEAL for 14 years. Operated in 17 countries, seen more combat than I care to remember. Worked with every kind of operator, Army, Air Force, Marines, contractors, foreign allied forces. I've witnessed courage in hundreds of different forms. But what you did coming back from psychological trauma to fly that mission, that's a different category of courage entirely. That's the hardest kind. Most people, when they break, they stay broken, or they rebuild in ways that carefully avoid anything resembling their original trauma. You rebuilt, then walked straight back into the fire the moment it mattered. That's not just brave, ma'am. That's genuinely heroic. I'm not a hero, Sergeant. I'm just a pilot who did her job under circumstances that required it. Heroes never think they're heroes. That humility is part of what makes them heroes." Morrison stood stretched. "Get some rest, ma'am. You've earned it. Tomorrow, we start fresh." That evening, Grace found herself in the small base exchange, browsing shelves of toiletries and snacks without any real purpose, just needing movement and distraction. A young female airman approached, nervously carrying a basket of items, but clearly building courage for something. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you Chief Whitaker?" Grace turned, noting the airman's youth, early 20s at most, fresh face, hopeful eyes. "I am. I'm Airman Sarah Chen. I work in maintenance with Chief Torres. I help service the A-10 fleet." She shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I heard about what you did, about who you really are, your actual background and service record. I just wanted to say thank you for showing us it's possible." "What's possible, airman? Being a woman in combat aviation, making it work despite everything stacked against us. I want to be a pilot someday, an attack pilot flying Apaches or A-10s. But sometimes it feels impossible, like the system's fundamentally designed to keep women out to make us fail." She looked down at her boots. "Seeing you, knowing what you've accomplished, learning your story, it gives me hope. Proves it can be done if you're skilled enough and determined enough." Grace studied this young woman carefully, seeing herself 2 decades earlier, ambitious, driven, terrified of failing, even more terrified of never getting the chance to try. She recognized that desperate hope, that hunger for validation, that need to know the impossible might actually be possible. "Airman Chen, I'm not going to lie to you. It's not easy. It's not fair. You will work twice as hard for half the recognition. You'll be questioned, constantly doubted, reflexively dismissed automatically. People will say, you're not physically strong enough, not mentally tough enough, not fundamentally good enough to do the job. They'll scrutinize every mistake, minimize every success, and hold you to standards they don't apply to male pilots. Chen's face fell hope, visibly draining. But here's the absolute truth that matters more than all of that: they're wrong. Gender doesn't determine capability or potential. Heart does, skill does, determination does, intelligence does. Grace stepped closer, her voice intense. You want to be an attack pilot? Then be the absolute best pilot in your entire training class. Outwork everyone, outstudy everyone, outfly everyone. When they say you can't prove you can with performance, they can't dismiss or ignore. Not for them, for yourself. Because you deserve to fly just as much as anyone else. Chen's eyes brightened, filling with renewed determination. Did you do that? Did you outperform everyone? Every single day, still do when it matters? Grace's expression softened slightly. And Chen, when you make it notice, I said when not is if, because I can see the fire in you. Remember this exact moment. Remember what it felt like to need encouragement and validation. Then give that same encouragement to the next generation of women coming behind you. Lift them up instead of guarding the door. That's how we change the system permanently. One generation supporting the next. Yes, ma'am, I will. I absolutely promise I will. After Chen left, Grace felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. For 10 years, she'd hidden from her identity run, from her legacy tried to become invisible. But hiding didn't erase what she'd been or what she'd accomplished. It just prevented others from benefiting from her example and experience. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to step back into the light. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years. One she'd kept saved, despite telling herself she'd never use it again. It rang 4 times long enough for doubt to creep in before a familiar voice answered. Chief Warrant Officer Whitaker, I've been wondering if I'd ever hear from you again. Colonel Sanders, it's been a while. 10 years, but I've kept track of you, heard about Kandahar, heard you saved SEAL Team 6, and reminded everyone why Night Stalkers have the reputation we have. Heard you're making waves. Grace smiled despite herself, despite the complicated emotions. Just did my job under circumstances that required it, sir. That's what you always said, even when you were doing things nobody else could do. His voice shifted, became more serious. Listen, reason I answered immediately, I'm not at Fort Rucker anymore. I'm at Special Operations Aviation Command, now heading up the Advanced Training Division. We desperately need experienced instructors, people with real combat experience, proven teaching ability, and the kind of skills that can't be learned from manuals. We need you, Grace. Sir, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not ready to return to active duty. Not after. Then don't return to active duty. Stay contractor status, but teach. Pass on what you know to the next generation. We have young pilots coming through who need to learn from the best. You're the best, Grace. You always have been. Help us make sure the next generation of Night Stalkers is ready for what's coming. She was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Airman Chen, about Fletcher and his team, about all the ways her experience could serve a purpose beyond just keeping herself alive. Teaching meant commitment. Teaching meant engaging with the special operations community she'd abandoned. Teaching meant facing the past instead of hiding from it. Let me think about it seriously, sir. I'm not saying no, I'm saying I need time to process. Fair enough. Take whatever time you need. The door's always open. Call me when you're ready. 2 weeks after the mission that changed everything, Grace formally accepted Colonel Vance's offer of direct tasking status for time-critical missions. On-call contractor with launch authority, bypassing standard approval chains when lives were on the line. She wouldn't fly routine cargo runs anymore when she flew. It would be for missions that mattered, situations where skill and experience made the difference between success and catastrophe. The A-10 had been fully repaired, certified green status, ready for combat. Grace conducted her first post-incident sortie, a training flight with Morrison in the back seat, just the two of them working through tactical scenarios and emergency procedures. The aircraft responded to her touch like an extension of her body, every control input producing exactly the result she intended. The trauma was still there. The loss of her crew still hurt. The memories of Yemen still haunted her sleep. But flying didn't paralyze her anymore. Flying felt right again. Natural, like breathing. She could fly, she could fight, she could save lives when it mattered most. Maybe that was enough, maybe that was everything. One evening, 3 weeks and 2 days after the Valley mission, Grace sat in her quarters reading a technical manual on updated weapon systems when her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. She almost ignored it. Telemarketing calls somehow found their way even to FOB phone systems, but something made her answer. This is Whitaker. Chief Warrant Officer Whitaker. This is General Oliver Briggs, Joint Special Operations Command. Do you have time for a classified conversation? Grace sat up straighter, her entire body suddenly alert. J.S. Oaks, the command that oversaw Delta Force SEAL Team, 6th the 160th Special Operations Aviation, Regiment the most elite units in the entire U.S. military. Yes, sir, I have time, and I'm in a secure location. Excellent. I'm calling about a developing situation that requires someone with your very specific and very rare combination of skills and operational discretion. His voice was measured carefully neutral in the way senior officers spoke when discussing classified operations. I've been thoroughly briefed on your Kandahar mission, extremely impressed by your performance under pressure, but more importantly, I've reviewed your complete service record including all the classified portions that most people will never see. Sir, I retired from Special Operations a decade ago. I'm aware of your status, but this situation is delicate in ways that require unconventional solutions. We need someone who can operate without standard oversight, someone who doesn't appear in current active duty databases, someone who has the skills and experience but not the official footprint that comes with current military service. Grace felt her pulse accelerate. Sir, that sounds like you're asking me to operate off books, which raises significant legal and ethical questions. Not off books, parallel books. Everything completely legal, everything properly authorized through classified channels. But quiet, discreet, low profile. The kind of work you used to do with the Night Stalkers, except now you'd be the primary asset rather than just providing transportation. What's the mission? Can't discuss operational details over this line, even if it is secure, but it involves the Pakistan border region. High-value target with time-sensitive intelligence. Small operational window. We need someone in-country within 72 hours who can move quietly without triggering the usual diplomatic and intelligence community alarms. Grace stood and walked to her window, looking out at the flight line, where the A-10 sat illuminated under floodlights ready and waiting. She thought about Yemen, about her crew, about the cost of combat operations. Then she thought about the 12 SEALs, about Airman Chen, about the difference one skilled person could make when they chose action over hiding. General, I need to know, is this a direct combat mission with high probability of enemy engagement? High probability of contact, yes, but it's a targeted operation, not sustained combat. Surgical strike capability required. Get in, accomplish the objective, extract cleanly. Your skill set matches our requirements perfectly. She looked at the photograph on her desk, her old Night Stalker crew, forever frozen in time, forever young, forever gone. Then at the SEAL Team coin sitting beside it, gold gleaming in the lamplight. She thought about Fletcher's words. Maybe it's enough. Maybe it's peace. Or maybe it wasn't enough yet. Maybe there were more lives to save, more missions that mattered, more opportunities to prove that her survival in Yemen had meaning and purpose beyond just continuing to breathe. General, I'm in. Send me the classified operational brief. Outstanding. I'll have it in your secure email within 30 minutes. Detailed instructions will follow, and Chief, welcome back to the fight. The special operations community has missed you. The call ended. Grace sat heavily on her bunk, processing the magnitude of what she'd just agreed to. 72 hours until Wheels Up, a mission in Pakistan that officially wouldn't exist. Dangerous, but necessary. The kind of operation that changed outcomes at strategic levels. She should have been scared, should have been hesitant, should have remembered Yemen, remembered loss, remembered the brutal cost of combat operations in hostile territory. Instead, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 10 years. She felt ready. Grace opened her laptop and accessed her secure email account. The brief was already there, marked top secret with additional compartmented access restrictions. She opened it and began reading. 5 pages in, she understood why they needed someone with her specific skills. 10 pages in, she understood the strategic importance and the compressed timeline. By page 15, she understood why this mission could potentially change the entire regional security dynamic. And she understood that some people were born to run away from danger, while others were born to fly directly into it. She'd spent 10 years running. Time to fly again. Time to prove that warriors don't retire, they just wait for battles worth fighting. Grace pulled out her notepad and began making detailed preparation lists. Equipment requirements, weapons qualifications to refresh and validate, communications protocols to review and memorize, physical conditioning to peak. She had 72 hours to reach optimal operational readiness, and optimal readiness required systematic preparation. But before she dove into mission planning, she pulled out her phone and sent 3 carefully worded messages. First to Morrison, Sergeant might need a backseat observer for something classified in the very near future. Interested in volunteering. Response came within 45 seconds. Ma'am, anytime, anywhere, whatever you need, I'm absolutely in. Second to Fletcher. Lieutenant, remember when you said if I ever needed anything, I could call, I might need tactical ground support for a classified mission. Can't provide details yet. Interested response in under 2 minutes. Chief say when and where. My team and I will be there, guaranteed. Third to Colonel Sanders at SOCOM. Sir, this is Whitaker. Been thinking seriously about your instructor offer. After this next mission, let's talk details. I think I'm finally ready to pass on what I know to the next generation. Response in 5 minutes. Outstanding news, Grace. We'll be waiting. Go accomplish your mission. Come back safe. Then help us build the future. Grace closed her laptop, stood and walked to her locker. She pulled out her old flight suit, not the faded contractor gray, but the forest green Nomex of active duty military service. She'd kept it for 10 years, despite telling herself she'd never wear it again, couldn't bring herself to dispose of it, couldn't quite sever that final connection to who she'd been. Now she held it up to the light, looking at the name tape that read, Whitaker, in black letters, looking at the empty Velcro patches on the chest, where her 160th SOAR unit insignia used to be attached. She'd removed all unit identification when she resigned her commission, thought the chapter was permanently closed, thought she was done forever. Maybe it had never really closed. Maybe it was just waiting for her to heal enough, waiting for a mission important enough, waiting for her to be ready. Grace hung the flight suit on her door, ready for tomorrow's preparation activities, ready for the countdown to mission launch, ready for whatever came next. She returned to her desk, looked one final time at the photograph of her crew, her family, the 7 warriors who died so she could live. And she whispered into the quiet room, I'm not running anymore. I'm flying again. Flying toward the missions that matter, toward the fights worth fighting toward, making every day count for something, for you, for everyone who needs help, for everyone who can't fight for themselves. I promise I'll make my survival mean something. I promise I won't waste the life you gave me. The photograph couldn't answer, but somehow Grace felt like they heard, felt like they understood, felt like maybe after 10 long years of survivor's guilt and self-imposed exile, they could finally rest, knowing she'd found her way back to purpose. She turned off the light and lay down, but sleep remained elusive. Her mind spun with tactical considerations, with mission variables, with the 1,000 critical details that separated successful operations from catastrophic failures. But underneath the operational planning, underneath the tactical analysis, there was something else. Something profound and fundamental that she'd lost in Yemen and only just now recovered. Purpose. She'd spent 10 years merely surviving, going through the motions, existing without truly living. Now, it was time to start living again with intentionality and meaning. Living meant accepting risk. Living meant possible loss and pain. Living meant walking back into the fire, knowing you might get burned. But it also meant saving lives that mattered, making differences that lasted. Being the person she'd trained to become the pilot she'd always been, meant to be the warrior her crew had died believing she was. And that was worth any risk, worth any cost. Grace finally drifted towards sleep, and for the first time in years, she didn't fear the dreams that might come. No nightmares tonight, no ghosts. Just peaceful darkness and the promise of a new mission, a new challenge, a new opportunity to prove that warriors never truly retire, they just wait for the right battle to call them back. Tomorrow, preparation would begin in earnest. In 72 hours, wheels up toward Pakistan. And somewhere on a border that officially didn't exist in a mission that officially wasn't happening, an operation requiring someone who officially wasn't there would unfold. Lucky for everyone involved, Grace Whitaker had spent the last decade learning how to be someone who didn't exist on paper, while remaining absolutely lethal when circumstances required it. Now, it was time to put that hard-earned skill to use. Morning would come soon. The mission would follow, and when it did, certain people would learn, once again, what military professionals had known for 2 decades. When you need a miracle, you call a Night Stalker. When you need the impossible, you call Valkyrie. And when Valkyrie answers the call, heaven help anyone standing in her way. Grace smiled in the darkness and whispered one final thing to the photograph she couldn't see but knew was there. Guess I'm not done yet, not even close. And somewhere in whatever place warriors go when they fall, 7 voices whispered back in the language of memory and love. We know, we always knew. Go save some more lives, Chief. Make us proud, again.